Everyday heroes, extraordinary vision, stories and inspiration from our world to yours. This is WSA Radio.
Amma from Europe, how exciting
Thank you.
that technology allows us to do this.
Amazing. It is amazing. I'm talking to you now from The Hague in Holland.
Oh, how exciting. How is The Hague today?
Well, we're at that kind of winter time of year where it starts to get dark around 3:30. You get lovely bright mornings and really dark afternoons. So we're in that winter place, but I still love it here.
Yes, Canada, we do have those long winter nights and long summers too. So Thank you so much for being willing to step out of your extremely busy day and
you're so welcome
and spend time chatting with me about what I hope are things that a lot of women want to discuss and chat about. And so I really want to start off with first complimenting you on the impeccable job you did with Belle.
Thank you.
I fell in love with that movie. I fell in love with the trailer. And then I said to my husband, we have to watch this. And, men. But I just, we have this big 60-inch TV. And so I said, you know what? We're going to download it from iTunes. And we're going to have a Sunday night by the fire. And you're going to watch it. And, you could just feel his eyes roll around at a period piece. But my husband fell in love with the movie. We both did.
That's the, luckily, thankfully, that's the blessing we have had with the movie in the sense that, when they first started testing the movie, when the studio and the producers first started testing it, the belief was that this is a woman's movie and this is going to be a lot of mothers and daughters and, a great Mother's Day movie, which thankfully it was. But what was also really, really nice was the fact that a lot of men really connected, particularly to Tom Wilkinson's story, Lord Mansfield's story, and that the element of law and how the law played a part, and how the law worked then and still can be worked today. Marine law is used to make a moral judgment. And, that is law. Law is a game. And sometimes morality comes out of it and sometimes it doesn't. But men really seem to kind of hook on to that. And I was really pleased about that.
You're absolutely right. While we were watching the movie, my husband himself has been on an unfortunate side of dealing with lawyers, which is part of our world now. And we were identifying how important it was for that role in the character that he was given something that would help him work beyond his hesitation, something so strong, so compelling that he had to respond. And that's what I think it is today when we're passionate about changing laws. We've got to give our lawmakers something that is greater than what they're dealing with, that's so passionate that it helps them to change. How did you manage to create that in that character? Because that was brilliant.
Well, what you see in the character on screen is essentially what I saw in the historical character when I started to research him. And what I saw was a man who was immensely conflicted, a man who played many roles in life, as we all do. He's a father, he's a judge, he's a husband, he's a brother taking care of his maiden sister who never got married. He's all of these things. And what's really important for me in creating characters is to try and make them as human as possible. I don't believe there's any point into telling macro stories if you don't tell the micro stories within them, and how these great big macro issues in our lives affect us one by one. And so for me, it was really important. I came to this from the get-go. I want to make him a dad. And there are times where I just want to see him, and I want to see him going through the trials and tribulations of just bringing up a teenage daughter. And my stepdaughter now is a gorgeous 17-year-old. But, there are trials and tribulations when you're a parent because you care so much. So I wanted to make him a father. I wanted to make him a judge. And, my father as you know, died during the making of the movie, as I've said in interviews before. And one of the things that we were going through, because my dad was on life support 3 years before he died, and then he kind of almost was reborn again and was able to walk me down the aisle and do a speech at my wedding, but and then he became ill again and finally died. So during that period where he was on life support and we were dealing with doctors, I was really thinking about the professional and what is it that crosses them over from the professional into the personal, and is that useful or not for them? Because of course we non-doctory people, you know, we assume it is going to be useful, and I guess sometimes it is and sometimes it isn't. And so I started thinking about this in terms of Lord Mansfield and this idea of raising a biracial niece that he raised as a daughter that he loved and adored, and whether this was going to be useful for him or not useful, whether this was going to be useful for the wider world and the future that for them then that we currently inhabit today, or whether it was not. And from those explorations, you know, I started to create the conflicted character that I thought Lord Mansfield must have been, and draw from that, really.
I think you captured it beautifully, because here is a man who has somehow removed himself from the tradition of buying into the whole concept of distinction in color. He's clearly colorblind. He probably was aware of the cultural challenges around that, but certainly he himself presents himself in the way I was raised, which is to be colorblind. There was no color. A human was a human. I loved that. It's unusual to have found that in that age. Do you believe that the way you presented that, do you believe that that's really, that he really was that removed from the challenges of his day?
Well, you see, what I wanted to explore and what I wanted to look at as well was this issue of conditioning versus instinct, or as we put it more often, say kind of nature versus nurture.
Right.
And, you know, Lord Mansfield would have been raised around, you know, other people who did see colour, and his peers, whether it be in the law or, you know, legal peers or just wealthy people, that they would have seen colour, and so many of them would have been, if not all of them, directly benefiting from the slave trade. So, you know, for me, it's always about defining the various elements that inform a particular circumstance. So for those people around him, it would have been a legal situation, it would have been a financial situation, it would have been about their livelihoods, as well as about a status thing. And I think it would have been difficult for Lord Mansfield to have been divorced from all of that. But I think what I wanted to show was that this man, despite his conditioning, despite his nurturing, reached inside to the real man, to the real soul of who he was, and dealt with his instinct and his nature rather than his nurture. And that's really what I wanted to show, was that almost in spite of his circumstances, he was still able to do the right thing.
What I love about that is it's such an inspiration, especially around the events today going on very recently in Europe with yourself, and the anger that comes up that is completely inexplicable, why humans would experience that kind of anger towards one another and in innocence, truly. Do you believe that today that there has been any kind of evolution of thought around that whole issue of racism and bias in Europe compared to North America? We hear about North America all the time, but not too much about what the struggle is in Europe.
We do. And, you know, I sit there confounded and conflicted and analysing all of the time this question that you've just asked me in so many ways, around this question that you've just asked me. Because you know what? In my everyday life, 75% of what I see is people being good to each other. People, you know, I see kids who I truly believe do not see colour. And if they do, they see it as a positive. They see, you know, culture and racial differences as a positive. You know, I see, you know, the world of music and how music inspires kids across races, across cultures, you know, across class barriers, all of that. I like to think film does, you know, a lot of elements of culture do affect and cross barriers. And yet I sit there and I look at the news and I see stuff that just breaks my heart. And quite often I can't put the two worlds together. I can't connect the two worlds. And I think, like the rest of the world, Europe is kind of divided into, partly a world that just gets on with things and, goes through day to day, actually not tolerating each other, because toleration is an awful word. It means that you're putting up with something, but actually getting on together. And then there's this other side of it where it's inhumane, and there's hatred, and there's anger, and there's religion being used for the wrong thing, and issues of race being blamed for the wrong thing. And, I guess that's what I as a writer and I as a director kind of use as my fuel to explore the world. This dichotomy between a world that can be so right and a world that can be so wrong. And in so many ways, that's what all my films are kind of based around, really.
I think the ability to influence the world through the art industry is much more powerful than we think. Images invoke emotion. Emotions surface the things that we're not resolving inside of ourselves. And the opportunity to change those things dynamically, I think, is what I hear you saying. So you're much more than, I'm a filmmaker and this is something that I would love to do in my life. It seems to be in your soul as a passion. Would you be able to describe for us, what do you think contributed to that kind of depth in choosing a career? Because that's not just spinning a bottle and picking a career. That's a heart-driven message and passion. What contributed to that?
Well, nobody's ever asked me that question before, so I kind of have to think about it. It's funny. I was raised by a really sensitive father and a really witty and astute mother. And I think, and both of them were great observers as well as great kind of contributors to life. And I think being raised by, two people like that, we've discussed the fact before, albeit in writing by email, that, they were immigrants, and so I'm first generation British, and, so there was a lot of life for them to observe, and there was a lot of thinking about how they might integrate and take part in this new life that they came to 55 years ago or so. And I think, I became an observer too. I was a very shy child. And I recently, I'm so backward at 45, discovered this term, highly sensitive people. So I'm an HSP. I'm definitely a highly sensitive person. I suddenly recognized myself online the other day. And music makes me cry. Music makes me happy. After my father died, I couldn't listen to music for a very long time because it was too evocative for me.
Yes.
And I have always loved the fact that art, paintings make me cry, movies make me cry, movies make me happy. They change the way I feel. And at a very young age, I kind of understood that art can move you in a very practical sense. It can make you feel differently by the end of a piece, by the end of looking at a piece or observing or experiencing a piece than you did at the beginning. And I found that so powerful. I found that whole idea of the fact that oftentimes people can't change the way I feel, right, but art can. And I just found that, I must admit, I found that incredible. I didn't know that my work would necessarily do that. But I always knew that when I was sitting at the typewriter and writing, and if I came to an emotional moment in a movie, I would start to cry. If you're all crying at the end of Belle, trust me, so am I.
Yes.
If you're angry at a moment in Belle, trust me, so am I at that point. And I'm in the middle of doing a rewrite on one of my scripts at the moment, and I'm in the same place, I listen to music while I'm writing, and I listen to the appropriate music for me, Yes. And appropriate can be a weird thing, because sometimes with Belle it was rap, and other times it was a wonderful piece of classical music like Handel. So it just kind of depended which area I was at that moment in the emotion. So I think all of those things, being impacted by art, has made me want to impact with art. And so with something like Belle, you know, what better way to be inspired than by a piece of art that moved me, which was the painting, really.
Hey ladies, would you like to be part of a powerful group of women who are moving and shaking and up to big things? Well, join the community at WSA and get started today with a free associate membership. Just log on to www.joinwsa.com. That's www.joinwsa.com.